Hello, gentle marketers. Welcome to the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host here. And this is the fourth part of our series around the 7 chakras and how they relate to gentle marketing. I've been posting these special episodes on Wednesdays, and my guest for this was Lisa Peterson. And so today I'm back with the last of this series, and we're discussing the throat, the brow, and the crown chakra. In case you missed the first 3 episodes, you can go back to sarahsanacroce.com/Lisa, Leisa, and listen to those replays. You'll also find the visual that we're talking about on this episode and the others, and also a link to an episode where Lisa and I talked about her recent book called The Mindful Millionaire. So without further ado, here's our beautiful conversation around the throat, the brow, and the crown chakra and how they aligned with business and marketing. Enjoy. Hello. We're back with Lisa Peterson in this third part of the conversation around chakras and how they align with gentle marketing. In case you missed the first 2 episodes, you can go to sarahsanacroce.com/Lisa. That's Leisa, and you'll find the replays there. And today we're back discussing the last 3 chakras. That's throat, brow, and the crown. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, so happy to be back.
That's great. We recorded these over a week, and we just had so much fun hanging out together the whole week. So this has been great. All right, throat chakra. Let's just take a moment to kind of visualize where it is, and then maybe you can kind of tell us what it stands for, what the topics are that come up there, also related to business and marketing.
Beautiful. So the throat chakra is exactly where you can imagine. I mean, at the base of the throat, and it is representing expression. Also, what I've noticed is that when we tune into the ability of a human being to express themselves, we also, behind that, notice that if we don't trust ourselves, it's very hard to be expressive, especially about the things that are most important to us. And so trust and expression go together, and that'll play out when we understand kind of how the role it plays in business. But what we've been talking about all along is this idea that there are these energetic blocks, and the more we can tune into the blocks and move those blocks out of the way, the easier it is for us to show up in our business and doing the things that we most love, and then feeling confident about being expressive of who we are, what our message is, how we help people, all of those good things.
Yeah. What comes to mind is, since we're at the throat, we're using, like you said, our voice. We need this trust to actually be able to speak our truth and our opinion. So to me, what comes to mind is the P of promotion. So really, when it comes, okay, you've done all the inner work, and you know who your ideal client is, you know what you are offering to this world, and now it's time to put yourself out there and voice those opinion and share those things, and really, like you said, it comes back to trust. That's one thing. Another topic that comes up for me is this idea of transparency. Like, to be not just expressing ourselves, but really expressing ourselves with honesty and transparency.
Most definitely. It's interesting because I think that we really do need to trust ourselves and also trust others in the world that they're going to be able to receive what we're saying, right? So there's just this expression of that. And we'll also be talking later about integrity. But it's so interesting because as we've already seen, as we've been going through this, each one leads to the next one. Mm-hmm. So we went from pricing and making sure that whatever we're creating is in alignment with the value, right? That we're wanting to put out there, and we're being paid to do that and feeling good about it. And then we move into expression, and we move into this trust. And what I say is the catalyst of when we know that something needs to change is that we start to sense that trust issues are actually decreasing our self-confidence. And, this is deep work, but if you think about it, like most of the time before we're going to change something and really step into our truth, we're going to have some kind of breakthrough. And all of what we've been talking about is leading you to breakthroughs where it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, I can see how me not trusting myself has kept me from being fully confident in the work that I do or in the things that I help people with.
Yeah. So again, it's back to, first the inner work, the being, and then comes the doing. And that's, the voicing, the putting your campaigns out there, and the visibility that in every kind of marketing program, we talk about that first as the most important thing. How do you get more visibility? But all this visibility is useless if the whole picture doesn't make sense, right?
Right. And sometimes this is where the difference I'll point out is, let's say you start a business and all you do is market other people's products and services. Mm-hmm. And some people do that, or they have better success selling other people's stuff than their own. Mm-hmm. So this transition has a lot to do with sales, because what is it that we're expressing? We're expressing the thing that we're offering to the world. And then we're basically holding space for someone to say, oh, I want that. And again, we're also dabbling in the rejection a bit, but that's why trust is so important, because when we want to be really good in sales, we have to be trusting ourselves so much that we're going to stay in the uncomfortableness of pitching an idea, of pitching a product, and be like, even though I'm feeling the resistance right now of what somebody is meeting me, as I tell them about something, we feel the resistance. We're like, I'm so confident about what I'm doing. I'm okay with that resistance. I'm okay with that discomfort.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And also, I think you're okay with this discomfort because you have already done the work before, that this is your ideal client, and that they would really benefit from actually working with you. And it's not an ego-driven kind of, let me just get the money and, then we'll see. It's really like coming from this place of service where you have to express your truth because that will help the other person.
One of the things I know we've talked about before is like, where do these blocks come from? Right. Yeah. And this is a masculine, as we've talked about, chakra. Mm-hmm. And when I tune into it, and I know this is one that I have been working on for, I feel like, my whole life, especially as a business owner, as a salesperson, the throat chakra is one that I return to again and again. And I feel like I can always learn more about, because I came from a home where my father was very authoritarian. And he would often look at me and say, you are meant to be seen and not heard.
Wow.
Yeah. And it totally messed with my psyche. Mm-hmm. So in the context of just communicating with friends, no problem there. But when I have to be outward facing with the world and communicate my products and services, I notice that I have to work a bit harder to get past the mind stuff that tells me nobody wants to hear this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel similar, not for the same reasons, but I feel like, yeah, talking about myself and my services, and I think probably a lot of gentle marketers can relate, where I think gentle marketers it's easier for us to express our worldview. And that's why I talk about so much about our values and our worldview, because that's where we go back to the passion. If we are so passionate about a topic that we just, can't even hold ourselves back and talking about it, that's where it's less about me and it's more about, the reason we're doing what we're doing. But I totally get that it's a difficult one for a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm sure, the throat chakra.
And the fear underneath what I found all of this is this fear of not feeling significant.
Mm-hmm.
As human beings, most of us, I think very few people are so inwardly radiating this kind of feeling of I'm significant regardless of anything that happens in the external world. Most human beings want to be in connection with others. And part of that connection is feeling like we are contributing to the world, to the relationship, and so on. And so I think that when we acknowledge that we do have a desire to feel like what we're saying matters and what we're saying makes a difference, just like all the other shadows we've been exploring, we allow ourselves to say, yeah, you know what? I do want to feel like this matters. And that's reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes me think of my human design, and you also work with human design. So where there's these profiles, there's the kind of the archetypes, and then there's, even if you go even deeper, there's profiles, and so I have one that's kind of in contradiction. On one hand, I'm like this leader type, but on the other hand, I'm a one who is always questioning myself. And so whenever I'm speaking, I hear this voice in my head saying, what are you saying? That makes absolutely no sense. And, it's, I don't know if it's just me, but I think that's something that is really difficult, to hear yourself speak and at the same time wondering, am I making sense? Am I getting my point across? All these doubts that we have in our heads. And yeah, they're probably related to the throat chakra.
Are you defined in the throat chakra? Do you know?
Good question. I don't remember.
I'm undefined.
Yeah.
And what that basically means is that I came into this life to learn about this particular thing we're talking about. Like, it has not been easy for me. I'm learning all the time. Even in conversations, and I do a lot of interviews. It's like, I'll say, does that make sense? Does that resonate? Is that, because I don't always know. And it's really important for me to be in communication and connection with other people. So if we're communicating, I want to know that what I'm saying is contributing to the conversation, and that allows them to respond. And then we can have these really deep conversations. If that doesn't happen, it actually throws me off. And I had a conversation on a podcast yesterday, and this interviewer, this is the third time on his show. And I'm like, he keeps letting me come back, but it's funny because I feel like we're on two completely different wavelengths, because he's always thinking about the next question to ask. And I'm like, are we connecting? So like, if you knew that was what was happening when you listened to the conversation, it probably explained things. But I always feel like, I don't know if that went that well. Like, I don't know what was going on and if he was even resonating with what I was saying, because I could get no feedback from him.
Yeah. So yeah, really what you're saying is that the voice, what we're expressing, and that's where the significance comes in. It's not just, are we giving ourselves permission to express ourselves? We want the feedback as well. We want to feel that we're in connection, that what we're saying resonates with the receiver. Otherwise, we're just talking to ourselves.
I mean, and isn't that the personification of consciousness, of gentle marketing? That this idea that we're just going to put a whole bunch of emails out into the world and not have any idea if it's landing or not, like, that is not very fun.
No, yeah. It's also this idea of inclusion, right? We actually want people to, talk back to us, like you said, not just, in back in the days, the webinars were like the typical example of exclusion. It was the guru presenting and then pitching, and everybody else just had to sit there and swallow it all up, and it wasn't really able to communicate back. So
yes. And this is what we're opening here with the throat chakra. We
right.
are looking at the framework and we're saying, where are there some opportunities for me to deepen my expression, my connection with my audience, and also be open to this idea that maybe part of the fear that's underneath everything is this fear that I might not be significant.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that is a fear for you, how might you make sure that you're setting up your marketing so that you are receiving feedback, so that you are in connection, so you are getting surveys after a campaign is done, right? So that you're hearing from people like, why didn't you decide? I can make up all these stories in my head, but why don't you tell me? What could I do better? What would be more appealing to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's really this, I mean, marketing is connecting and communicating. And so the throat and the voice has everything to do with that. Any last thoughts or advice on kind of rebalancing the throat chakra?
The other piece is permission. So just giving yourself permission to try things, to show up again and again and again. Even if it doesn't work the first time, it's okay, because we have time and we keep trying. And I think the worst thing we could do is not put ourselves out there.
Yeah. What comes to mind is it doesn't only have to do with the throat, but definitely like, putting something new together and then fearing that nobody's going to show up. So yeah, again, there's the fear of not being significant, also the fear of being rejected. So all these things kind of play together, right? Yeah. Shall we move on to the third eye or brow chakra? Let's do that.
Yeah.
Why don't you, again, kind of guide us through what kind of topics and themes come up there?
Beautiful. So we're moving into the head, right? And this is where we are bringing a lot of the journey together. That's how I like to think of it. So all the things that we've already covered are coming together. But the addition that we haven't talked about is this added element of our intuition. And combining that with all the wisdom and experience that we've gained through our lifetime, through our time as a business owner, through all of the things that we've been soaking in, trying, failing, repeating, all of that comes together in the brow chakra. And symbolically, to me, this is when we say to ourselves, wow, look at how far I've come. Look at who I have been, who I'm being in the world. And this sense of enoughness is really wanting to come through in all that we do. Like, this is the place where I think all of us want to be operating, where sometimes we're able to make decisions because we're like, yeah, I see all the data and it's pretty clear. And we're also able to say, and my intuition supports all of this data and experience and wisdom. Or everything looks great on paper, but I still have this inkling that something's not right. And I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to go do more research because something's not right in my intuition with what's happening here. And we're bringing those two elements together and saying, this is part of being whole as a human being, not saying it's just intuition, not saying it's just charts and graphs, but bringing all parts of our business together.
I love that. I truly hope that that's where we're headed in terms of the new business world. It's this, increased consciousness that kind of also lets us play, I guess, with different things that are not necessarily measurable anymore, right? Like I'm thinking of joy and happiness and those kind of things that right now we haven't, they haven't had their place so much in business. It was kind of separate. It's like, okay, we have fun and play, on our own time, and then we work hard in our business. And so I'm hoping that if we're going towards a society that is more open in that chakra, then we can kind of, dance from one to the other.
One of the big things that I think happen for a lot of us, especially when we're on the consciousness journey, and both you and I have had this happen, where you realize that you've been doing a lot of things because the money was appearing to be in the direction of what, like the world is saying, do this and the money will follow. Mm-hmm. And that was in spite of our intuition. All along, if we look back, there was this little inkling that maybe that wouldn't be the best strategy. And so not shaming, not guilting, just acknowledging that this happens, especially as new business owners, we're trying to find our way through, and we can throw out our intuition sometimes and focus on the business. But what this leads to for many people is waking up one day and looking at your business and thinking, I need to make some really big changes because this isn't working for me.
Right. Yeah, because the old way will just somehow lead to burnout. Or until now, I think we were all kind of in this trance where that's just how it was. But I think since the frequency is rising and consciousness is also on the rise, we will actually be more aware of our feelings, that we're not feeling good doing the things that we've always done. And that's where, this awakening starts to happen. So it's really a place where everything comes together.
Yeah, totally. And I was just thinking a story that just recently came up, and I think it applies to the brow chakra. And as you know, in my book, my goal was to understand each of these chakras in real life experiences, and how does this play out for people. And in this case, a person realizing that they had always been a rule follower. And
I'm one of those.
That's why I think this one's interesting. I know, huh? And what we realized through the work is that the rule following, if we have a belief system, I must follow the rules. Okay. And we don't question that assumption. The funny thing is that those beliefs about the rules and the way we're following them often come from a very shadowed place where we are following the rules because we want to fit in. We want to feel like we are enough. And if we follow the rules, then maybe everybody will think that we are enough. Mm-hmm. Okay. This goes back to, as we were growing up. And so one example of how that belief system, when it gets questioned and we dive into it and we start to realize that construct of I must follow the rules or I won't fit in blows up. All of a sudden, you realize that you're the one creating all the rules. There isn't some magical place out there that is telling you that you need to do all these things. But the mind says, you got to do this, then you got to do that, then you got to do this. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you're not going to be successful and you're going to be outcast and often off your running. And so why the brow chakra and what we're talking about is so important is that when you question your beliefs and assumptions about things like that, and that drops away, it is actually the only way that you open the door to the intuition, because the belief system will be stronger and more powerful than this super small voice inside that says, this isn't a good idea. No matter how many rule boxes you fit into, this isn't going to work for you.
Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah. It's this idea of really finding your own inner voice and only listening to that, and whatever rules are out there or success recipes or strategies, question your assumptions and finding your own inner voice as well.
And there's a lot to this idea of the rules. It's not like we're going to go out and speed and break all the laws out there. Like, that's not what we're questioning. We're questioning the prisons that we create in our own minds about how we're supposed to do things.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not just us who are doing that, it's everybody, and that's why it applies to a society of rule followers, right? In the Gentle Marketing book, I often refer to the sheep, and I say, you're not a sheep, you don't have to follow all the rules, right? And so it's really that idea of you can break the rules and you will still be enough, and finding that place there. Something else that I thought of when you were talking, you were saying you have to do this and you have to do this. It's this idea of timing as well. Like, I had this concept of money that was similar to the concept of time, meaning there was never enough time. And so going from that and then coming to, the brow, that's really when I realized there's enough time. I'm the boss of my time. And so really kind of trusting that there's enough time, and then also trusting kind of the timing, the universal timing, or whatever you want to call it. Would you say that kind of also fits under the brow, or is that maybe already the crown chakra?
I think that it's a combination. Remember, just like all of them, they build off of each other. So as we start to come into our intuition and we start to come into what I call the true self versus a small self, we start to notice that time collapses. And we start to notice that there is this thing called divine timing. And so, yes, when we get into the crown chakra, we can talk more about that. But we're opening up the idea that the rigidity in which we place on the idea of time and how much time we have to do any given task is actually not as linear as we thought.
Yeah. I think, that was such a big relief for me to really stop rushing. It's like, I think a lot of highly sensitive people struggle with that. I don't know why them especially, but I feel like that's the case.
Well, I have an example too, if it would be helpful, just about something I'm going through right now. And I feel like it's totally brow chakra. I am about to begin marketing. So, we're here in November of 2020 talking. And so I'm about to begin marketing this new program that I created over the next couple months. And I was looking at the election and looking at all the time factors of like, when can I do this? And we've got Black Friday and we've got Thanksgiving in the US and all these different things. And then I was like, but I need to do this. I need to do this. And I could tell that my anxiety, and by the way, when we reach these upper chakras, these are where the anxiety comes into our business. If it's not in balance and we're feeling anxious, it's because one of these upper chakras we're not listening. We're not paying attention to what we're talking about. So I was noticing the anxiety level rising and rising and rising, and some pressures about some things that we've got going on in our own. We run multiple businesses, and kind of, where is the money going to come from next year? And, it was just building up, building up. And I thankfully, after doing so much of this work, noticed that I was at a breaking point where I was not going to be able to put out good material to my community from this state of anxiety. It was going to fail before I even started. And I could feel what it was going to look like. And I was like, I don't want any part of that. And so I had to take a time out, just like a kid, like take a time out and realize that the only way I could do this was to break some rules, because the ideas in my head of how this was going to go down, there wasn't enough time for it. So as I backed away, I was like, okay, well, what could I do that would be so in alignment with myself and my integrity and my heart and my brow chakra? Like, what could I do? And what I came up with was I'm just going to be very oriented to coming from this place of education and service. And if the timelines and some of the things don't work out, I will know in the next week or the next week what's happening, rather than trying to plan it all out in my head of exactly what these dates are going to be that are giving me all the anxiety. And I'm going to be fluid. I'm going to adjust. I'm going to maybe have 2 different periods of launching because the first one might not be enough to accomplish the goals I have. So I'm going to allow myself the freedom of saying, well, maybe I show up again in a slightly different way with something else. But I'm going to, the minute I realized I could do it that way, all the anxiety dropped away. And I was like, okay, what do I want to help? How can I help people? Then I just came back to the heart and I was like, well, what's the most valuable for people? And I'm going to trust.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think, again, it goes against industry standards because we kind of hear of these launching periods and it's like, oh, you have to have an open cart and then you have to have this many emails and then you have to do a webinar. And so it's like this thing in our head where we're like, but I don't have 6 weeks. And what if people are not paying attention? And just saying, yeah, I'm just going to put it out there and trust that people need my help and then play with it. Exactly. It's kind of what I'm doing with the book. I'm like, okay, I don't want to do it now during, this intense time. But what would be fun was to launch the Kickstarter campaign because I just find that new and different and it would be fun. And then, the book can wait until next year. So yeah, giving yourself permission to don't see time as a thing that is stuck, that you can't play around with in a way, right?
Yep.
The other thing about this, are we at the crown yet? I think we're kind of blending them with each other. So.
Not quite. We haven't wrapped up the brow, I guess.
Okay. All right. I'll hold that thought for the crown. But yeah. So maybe any last thoughts about the brow and how we bring that into balance?
I think just realizing that we are integrated human beings and that when we can look at the big picture, the whole part, like all the parts of ourselves, the wholeness of ourselves, life becomes a lot easier in business too.
Yeah. That says it all. Yeah. All right, let's move on to the crown. We're doing 3 today, so woohoo! So crown chakra, it's at the top of your head, and tell us a bit more about it.
So this is where we get into the what many people will call like the woo-woo part of the discussion, because this is when it goes beyond, beyond the small self, beyond the limited nature of being a human being. And we open up to the possibilities of a higher power, of being able to just let go and let God, if you will, or whatever word or idea. I like to fill in the blank with lots of things like higher self, higher divine power. There's so many words, but the idea is there's something beyond us. And sometimes even we connect into Mother Nature, which is a really great, it's like the mysteries and miracles of Mother Nature. And here we are realizing that we have not always given ourselves credit for just how much we have available to us. Mm-hmm. We think, I got this education, I've done this work experience, I've got this much money. Those, 1 + 2 + 3 equals whatever, 6 is like, that's it. That's all I have to work with. And the divine connection says, maybe there's some things you don't understand. Maybe there are some possibilities beyond what your limited sense of yourself can even fully comprehend. And this is where synchronicity and opportunity kind of falls into your lap when you're least expecting it. And being open to the fact that we can't see all the configurations. And what I've noticed is that when we are connected to something beyond just our, human body experience, it becomes easier to decide about life. It's actually the opposite of what you might think. I think we bring in this idea of letting go, right? Surrendering to something beyond. And when we do that, that is a big decision for many of us, because many of us come from a very controlling, I want to know the outcome, I want a certain thing to happen. And I have found that my greatest joys in life come from the unexpected, come from the little miracles that come into my life. And this is just bringing that in to our awareness that luck, even, we could talk about luck being in the crown chakra. A big portion of our success in life has to do with being at the right place at the right time, having this mysterious sequence of events that all came together to help us have greater success. Like, we didn't do that, not like in the physical sense. It just all came together, and we're celebrating that. And we're realizing that that's part of what's happening here for us too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a vast topic, I think, the crown chakra, and is the one that took me the longest to really, really understand. I think, this year of COVID has definitely helped. It felt like a year-long retreat to really focus in on that crown chakra and this connection to spirituality or your higher self. I really like this idea of higher self. I have to admit I was having a hard time just with the word divine because of my upbringing and religion connection and all of that. And so really thinking, okay, for me, the divine, or whenever the divine was mentioned, I pictured this guy with a beard, and it just didn't work for me. Where I finally realized you don't, again, break the rules. Why are you thinking that? You can come up with your own idea of what the divine is, or what the magic is that brings luck into our life, or brings serendipity, or brings these magical moments, right? And so, really finding that within myself, and maybe it's in the crown chakra. I don't really know where it is, but somewhere inside of me is this higher self that I can connect with, and that is such a relief. And like you said, it really has to do with the disconnection from the outcome. So not grasping anymore, not attaching yourself to a certain outcome. I think that's a big one.
It's funny because there's a researcher in England who has studied luck extensively, and I love his books, and it's escaping me, but we can always put the link in. And he did all these interesting studies about things that we have a lot more to do with our luck than we realize. So, for example, when we think we're a lucky person, we have this uncanny way of having lucky things happen to us. And basically what he found was, you open your consciousness. And this is the same way I describe prosperity. So instead of, let's say you think, I'm not a lucky person. And one of the ways they tested this was they invited people to a meeting, and they wanted to see what happened when they put money on the pathway where they knew the person lived, and then they knew where the meeting was. So they're walking down the street, right? And there's like a $10 bill, like on the tree, or like funny things, money on the ground. And they were like, are they going to notice this? And what they found was the people who think they're lucky noticed the money on the way to the meeting. The people who didn't think that they were lucky didn't notice the money.
Wow.
Same thing went with an ad. They put an ad in a newspaper, and they had people come in and read the newspaper. And the ad on the newspaper said, if you notice this, you'll get 150 points for whatever the outcome was. But what they told everyone to do was read the paper to identify these certain things, and then they would, whatever, get the points. Well, a lucky person actually noticed the ad in the middle that said, you don't have to do any of this stuff. Just mention this and you're fine.
Yes.
And again, it was just like, just by being open to the possibility.
The idea of what you focus on, right?
Do you feel like anything can happen at any moment? And I honestly say, I feel like I'm like the luckiest person on the planet because I'm just always open. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's hard because I don't have great boundaries and I'm like looking all over. But then at the same time, it's like, it's brought some really great stuff and I probably am not going to change.
Mm. Let's talk a bit more about this idea of higher self and the small self. And I think we can also throw the word ego in there. So let's go there.
So there's lots of different, research, and Carl Jung and Freud, talking about the ego. What I've seen is that consciousness has really evolved over the past 100, plus years. And my way of thinking about the ego is the same as I would think about the small self. This identification to a certain, way of thinking, way of being, where I came from, all of these experiences wrapped up into this idea that is me, that person who went to college, who has these parents, who came from this kind of wealth, all of that stuff, that there's an identification with that person being the true you. Mm-hmm. In my 21 years of self-discovery and self-realization, I've come to see that none of that is me. None of that is the true me. That is what I call the small self. Now, there's aspects of the true me inside of all of it. And that's kind of the trick, is how do you find the higher self or the true self amidst a human experience? And so that's what we're doing as we start to think about this or try to parse it out or understand what's going on. The ego and the small self is very oriented to me, me, me. What am I going to get out of this? How am I served from this? What about me? If you get that, then am I losing? Like, it's a very scarcity oriented way of thinking when we're super attached to me, 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 me and mine. Maybe it's okay. Like, they're my kids. So I'm going to think about them, but anybody outside of my family, they're not as important, as we are. That's the small self. The higher self says we are all one. We are all connected. There is no separation. We are all here having a unified experience. And that's not easy for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it's also then the small self or the ego that, makes these goals and wants these achievements and wants these successes. And then if it doesn't get them, gets very, very frustrated because there's this attachment to those things. And they think if we fail at those, then basically the small self don't exist anymore, right? I have failed in my life purpose, maybe.
Yeah. Well, and this is, I do struggle with this because I run a business that is very oriented to raising consciousness and to helping other people, whether or not they can afford to pay me anything. And I don't know if I set out totally understanding that was what I was going to be building and that was what I was committing to. But it has not been easy because the small self will kick in and say, you shouldn't be doing any of these things because there is, all these folks that you're helping and they've never paid you a penny. And after a while, maybe that doesn't work. But the higher self is like, looks at the whole entire situation completely different and to say, really, you're not going to take that money with you. The only thing that you're going to be looking at in your life review on your deathbed is going to be, did I make a difference? Did me living here in this lifetime truly help others? That's all we're going to care about.
Right.
It won't be about how much money we made.
In a way, going back to the being and doing, the small self is the doer. Like, she's here on earth to get stuff done, and it's all those little small things, like it's also the small self that feels annoyed when the stove breaks in the kitchen, and you can like go into like a big frustration just because that stove that's now not working. I'm laughing because that just happened yesterday. So that's the small self, right? That's the Sarah living in this lifetime right now, where the higher self is the beer. I don't know if that's a word, but it's like you're not just here in this lifetime, but you have a bigger mission that you've come with, and so it's all about being. That's why making money doesn't matter to the high self so much.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't matter at all.
At all.
I mean, the small self will say, if you have the money, then you can get more done. And then there's nothing wrong with that. Like, we're not making either of these bad or good. We're just identifying that there is this duality for most of us. I mean, until we're enlightened, we see it all kind of into camps. And what I love to teach is that we can have both and I know you talk about this in the book. It doesn't have to be either or, right or wrong. We may have preferences. We may discern a choice. That's different than saying this is inherently bad from its own side and this is inherently good from its own side. Mm-hmm. We are dropping that idea because it's all bullshit anyways. It's not true. It's not real. What's real is what the higher self is ultimately going to channel to us, which is love and compassion and vision, which is the crown chakra. It's like this realized state of I am, and the vision I create for the world is, whatever's coming through, highest and best. How can we solve the problems in the world, so that people can come to understand who they really are?
Yeah. In a way, it's ties back into the purpose or passion from Gentle Marketing Mandala. So really having this bigger vision for your business. And again, we're not talking about the small things, or we're not talking about the number, right? Like how much money you want to make. That's not the vision. Or it's probably on some people's vision boards, but I'm not sure it should belong there. I don't know. What do you think?
The idea of how many people we touch, or, those sorts of things?
Just like, when we think about the manifesting kind of movement, there's often this mention of, put it on your vision board, how much money you want to make next year. And to me, that's more the small self talking, not really, again, because we just said the money doesn't matter for the high self.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's, as human beings, we are very powerful, when we want to focus our attention and time on anything. Like, we do have the ability of creating what we want. The question that I think we're raising is, it's like, is that the meaning of life? Just like being able to say, I want to, like if you go back to The Secret, I want a bike and then it appears, or I want a lot of money and then it appears. It's like, it isn't the destination, it is the journey. And that's where the manifestation gets carried away, because you can basically run from one place to the next, chasing experiences. And you will not be any happier when you achieve those chased experiences. That is not where true happiness comes from.
I love that. It's not about the result, but it's about the journey. And manifesting is mainly about the material results, right?
For the most part. I mean, that's why they make so much money doing it. That's why I've chosen not to use that much, that kind of wording in my approach. Yeah, I could go get a whole bunch of people who want to be focused on manifesting stuff, but I personally find it very self-centered and not always looking at the big picture. And I wanted my work to help people look at the big picture of life more than just getting what you want, And I think it's funny because I know when you interviewed me about the book and the choice of the title, I didn't come up with a title about it being millionaire. I can't remember the name of the book, The Mindful Millionaire. but it was because it's like this seductive thing that people are curious about. But when they get into the book, they're like, she's not just talking about like getting lots of money. In fact, I say right away, it's not really about what, I'm teaching. So, but again, we live in a world where people are looking for the quick fix. They're looking for the instant answer. And I think I'm hoping that anyone who's listened to this series of conversations is thinking about the fact that it is a journey. It is the choices that we're making moment by moment that are in integrity and that are coming from this beautiful place. Because if you want a beautiful business, if you want a business that's just going to like do amazing things in the world and bring you great satisfaction, it's going to be in the moment to moment experiences, not necessarily in the destination. And we want you to be successful. We want you to be able to have money. We want you to stay in business and feel like you're profitable. We're not sacrificing those things, but we're saying that you might be willing to take a bit less and be wildly happier by doing something different than what everybody else is saying.
Yeah, totally. So we talked about journey a lot right now. So can we say that the chakras are some kind of journey, upwards somewhere? Like, is it similar to Maslow's pyramid, for example?
Maslow's pyramid was inspired by the chakras. So yes. Yes. So it is moving your way up in consciousness. No question about it. But we're not skipping the root. We're not saying the root isn't important here, right? We're like all the stages are part of your human experience. When you can tune into all of them, you get to follow a map of creating more joy in your life.
So in a way, you can't really access the crown if you're still blocked in the root because the energy just won't flow upwards.
A little bit different than that. Some people access massive amounts of crown and brow and throat. And this would be the very spiritual beings on this planet where they're so preoccupied with this part of just letting the divine come in and live from that. The challenge with not going down and exploring the root and the sacral and the solar plexus and having it be part of your embodied experience is that you're broke.
Yeah.
So some people are what I call top down. They actually would be more comfortable if we had done this conversation in the opposite direction. There's nothing wrong with that. You and I just don't operate that way. Right. So I could only create the framework as it reflected the way I saw the world. Doesn't mean it's the only way. Some people could start at the crown and go all the way down. And the root is actually their enlightenment because it ultimately is like a circle or an infinity symbol.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's funny, it depends on how you see the world, right? Mm-hmm. So for us, it's like, of course, you start there and you work your way up. But then, yes. Yeah. Wow. How do we rebalance the crown chakra? So let's say for, people like me, where we come from this very pragmatic, very down to earth, how do we access the upper chakras?
Meditation is definitely one of those ways. Meditation on certain things, which would be meditating on Mother Nature and the mysteries that come with her, or meditating on a vision of what you want to see the world looking like allowing yourself to suspend disbelief and focus on fantasy, focus on dreaming, focus on, you could even say manifesting. This is when it becomes helpful. We're like, what are all the possibilities? I'm just going to make stuff up and hold space for that to also be possible. It's funny because it also has a bit of playfulness in it. Like we return to our childhood state where they're like, okay, envision that you're, in the United States, we would play cowboys and Indians. Like, this isn't very appropriate nowadays, but like, we just imagine, like, I'm a Native American and you're a cowboy, and off we'd go. Well, it's kind of the same thing that we're playing with. We're just like, what might the world look like? What might my life look like in the future? And this is why I call this reinvention, because the cool thing about doing this kind of visioning is you start to notice when you have an idea of what you want it to look like, and then you tune into what it looks like today, you may get some downloads that say, I need to make some changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I, having done that work, I totally agree. And it's funny. I still don't like any, like, the Harry Potter, fantasy, any kind of sci-fi and fantasy and stories like that. I just can't go there. Like I can't. But I've definitely opened up to, serendipity and miracles and signs and things like that. And I mainly do find it in nature. Like that's where I'm like, okay, I get the magic here, where in Harry Potter, it still escapes me.
Well, it's funny because what's coming to me is when you came and visited me in Sedona and we're sitting on the top of this, red rock, and you're like, could we do a meditation right now? And I was like, you want to? You're like, yes. And that was exactly what we're talking about here.
Yes. Yeah. Just the being in awe of nature and the beauty of that. That's where it gets me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this brings us kind of full circle. We did the chakra circle. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Anything you want to add?
Thank you. Just how honored I am to have the conversation with you. I'm so touched. Like I could get emotional right now because I feel like we've really created something together in this conversation, that has happened over the past week that I can feel will touch people in a way that maybe they weren't expecting to be touched.
Yeah, that's my hope too. Making a little difference on some people's lives. I'll just switch back to the doer and the pragmatic and mention all our links again. So sorry for the abrupt change, but I do want to mention again the previous episodes. So if people haven't heard those, I think it'll be good to go back and start from the root. So sarahsanacroce.com/Lisa, LEISA. On there, you'll also find Lisa's business diagnostic map. So kind of what we talked about in the different chakras. And it's a beautiful visual that kind of has all the different topics that we addressed. There'll also be a link to your website, wealthclinic.com, and the free gift that you have where people get a meditation, right? And then the diagnostic map as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. Thanks for doing this. This is my vision for marketing in the future. It's just we do what we do best, and we, provide content and we collaborate.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for the opportunity to co-create.
Thank you.